The stars looked peaceful through the viewport of the valiant dawn. Kate Morgan stood at her station, checking her weapons inventory for the third time that day. She had been a weapons specialist for 3 years now, and she took her job seriously. Every rifle had to be clean. Every power cell had to be charged. Every blade had to be sharp. "You're doing it again," Dan Cooper said from across the bridge. He was her friend and the ship's second pilot. "The weapons aren't going to disappear if you look away for 5 minutes." Kate smiled but didn't stop her work. "Preparation prevents problems," she said. It was something her old instructor used to say back on Earth. The Valiant Dawn was on a simple mission. They were escorting a diplomatic shuttle to Epsilon Prime, a neutral station where humans and Xanthari met to discuss trade agreements. The Xanthari were tall aliens with gray skin and 4 arms. They were stronger than humans and had better technology. For 3 years, there had been peace between their empire and humanity. But it was an uncomfortable peace. The Xanthari looked down on humans. They thought humans were weak and primitive. Captain Helen Price walked onto the bridge. She was a short woman with iron-gray hair and sharp eyes. "Status report," she said. "All clear, Captain," said Lisa Hayes from the sensor station. "No ships in range. The diplomatic shuttle is on schedule." "Good. Let's keep it that way." The captain sat in her chair and watched the screens. Kate checked her sidearm. It was a standard-issue pulse pistol, reliable and simple. She also had a combat knife strapped to her leg and a rifle mag locked to her back. She felt complete with her weapons. They were tools of her trade, extensions of her will. The alarm changed everything. "Multiple contacts," Lisa shouted. "Ships dropping out of hyperspace. They're Xanthari raiders." The bridge exploded into action. Kate grabbed her rifle and ran to her combat station. Through the viewport, she could see 5 Xanthari attack ships materializing around them. They were sleek and dangerous, covered in weapons. "Battle stations," Captain Price ordered. But it was too late. The raiders fired. The Valiant Dawn shook as energy weapons hammered against the shields. Kate held onto her station as the lights flickered. The ship was strong, but they were outnumbered. "Shields at 40%, someone called out. "Return fire," the captain ordered. Kate wanted to help, but weapons specialists didn't fire the ship's guns. She could only wait and hold her rifle, ready for boarders. And boarders came. "Hull breach on deck 3, Lisa shouted. "They're boarding us." Kate ran. Dan and 2 other crew members, Jake Morrison and Amy Walsh, followed her. They reached deck 3, just as the Xanthari cut through the final door. Kate took position behind cover and opened fire. Her pulse rifle spat blue energy bolts. She hit the first Xanthari in the chest, and he went down. But there were too many. The Xanthari had better armor and better shields. Kate's team fought hard, but one by one, they fell. Not dead, but stunned by Xanthari shock weapons. Kate saw Dan go down. Then Jake. Then Amy. She kept firing until her rifle overheated. She drew her pistol and kept shooting. He was bigger than the others, with elaborate armor and cold, dark eyes. "Surrender, human," he said, in perfect English. His voice was deep and filled with contempt. Kate aimed her pistol at his head, but before she could fire, something hit her from behind. Pain exploded through her body, and everything went dark. When Kate woke up, she was in a cell. Her head hurt, and her body ached. She tried to stand but found her hands were bound behind her back. The room was small and made of smooth metal. One wall was an energy barrier that hummed with power. The large Xanthari warrior stood outside her cell. His 4 arms were crossed, and he looked at her like she was an insect. "I am Commander Vexthal," he said. "You are now prisoners of the Xanthari Empire." "The treaty," Kate said, her voice rough. "You're violating the peace treaty." Vexthal laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "What treaty? There is no record of this attack. Your ship will be reported as lost to a reactor failure." Your bodies will never be found. He stepped closer to the energy barrier. But first, we will study you. We will learn your weaknesses. We will understand how such primitive creatures defeated our forces in the border wars. 2 guards entered Kate's cell. They cut her bonds but immediately grabbed her arms. They were incredibly strong. Kate couldn't break free. Vexthal walked into the cell and stood before her. Your weapons make you dangerous, he said. He reached down and took her combat knife from its sheath. Without them, you are nothing but soft flesh. He took her empty pistol. He took her rifle, which they had recovered from the ship. He even took the small backup knife she kept in her boot. He held up her rifle. This is a good weapon. Simple, but effective. A shame it will be melted down for scrap. He tossed it to a guard. Take all their weapons. Every blade, every gun, every tool. Leave them with nothing. The guards stripped away everything. Her equipment belt, her tactical vest, even her boots, which had reinforced toes that could be used as weapons. They left her in just her basic uniform. Vexthal leaned close. Kate could smell his breath, like metal and chemicals. Without your weapons, what are you? Nothing. You humans are weak. Your bodies are fragile. Your strength is pathetic. Only your tools make you a threat, and now those tools are gone. He turned and left. The guards followed. The energy barrier hummed back to life. Kate stood alone in the cell. She was unarmed. She was trapped. Her crew was captured. Her ship was probably destroyed. Everything seemed hopeless. But Kate Morgan smiled. Kate spent the first day just watching. She sat in her cell and observed everything. The guards came by every 4 hours. They were different each time, but they followed the same pattern. They would look at her, say something mocking in Zenthari, then laugh and move on. They thought she was helpless. She counted the seconds between their visits. 14,400 seconds. Exactly 4 hours. The Zenthari were precise, which was good. Precision meant patterns. Patterns could be exploited. The cell itself was interesting. The walls were smooth metal, but they had seams. The floor had panels that could be removed for maintenance. The energy barrier hummed at a specific frequency. Kate had good ears. She memorized the sound. Food came twice a day through a slot in the wall. The meals were bland paste in metal trays. Kate ate slowly, examining the trays. They were thin, but rigid. The edges were sharp enough to cut if used correctly. She kept one tray and hid it under the thin sleeping mat. On the second day, Kate started exercising. Push-ups, sit-ups, squats. The guards laughed at her. One said something in Zenthari, and they all laughed harder. Kate didn't care. She needed to keep her body strong. She needed to stay ready. She also started taking apart her uniform. The fabric was tough, synthetic material. She could tear it into strips if she pulled it the right way. She made several long strips and hid them under her mat with the tray. The guards never searched her cell. Why would they? She had no weapons. On the third day, Kate made her first tool. She found that one of the floor panels was slightly loose. Using her fingers, she worked it back and forth during the night, when no guards were watching. It took hours, but finally, the panel came free. Underneath was a gap, filled with wires and pipes. Kate reached in carefully. Her fingers found a piece of broken metal, probably a leftover from construction. It was about 6 inches long, and had a sharp edge. Perfect. She pulled it out, and hid it in her clothing. She also discovered something else. The pipes carried water. She could hear it flowing. Water meant pressure. Pressure could be useful. That night, Kate barely slept. She was too busy planning. She went through every scenario in her mind. The guards were bigger and stronger than her. Their armor was tough. Their weapons could stun or kill. But they were overconfident. They thought she was harmless. That was their weakness. On the fourth day, something changed. A new Zenthari arrived at her cell. He wasn't a guard. He wore a white coat and carried a data pad. His skin was lighter gray, and he had elaborate markings on his face. "I am Dr. Krell," he said in accented English. "I will be studying you." "I'm not interested in being studied," Kate said. Dr. Krell laughed. "Your interest is not required. You are property of the Zenthari Empire now. We will learn everything about human physiology, your weaknesses, your tolerances, your breaking points." "Sounds like torture," Kate said calmly. "We prefer to call it research," Dr. Krell said. He tapped his data pad. "Tomorrow, we begin. Prepare yourself." He walked away, his footsteps echoing down the corridor. Kate felt cold anger settle in her stomach. She had known the Zenthari were cruel, but this confirmed it. They weren't just holding prisoners. They were experimenting on them. How many others had suffered here? How many had died? She couldn't let that happen to her crew. She couldn't let it happen to anyone else. That night, Kate prepared everything. She took the strips of fabric from her uniform and braided them together, making a strong cord. She took the metal shard and wrapped one end with fabric, creating a handle. She practiced movements in the darkness, silent and precise. Strike here, block there, use their momentum against them. The morning came. Kate was ready. Dr. Krell arrived with 2 guards. The energy barrier dropped with a hum. The guards entered first, walking with casual confidence. They thought she would be easy to handle. Kate moved. She had always been fast. Her instructors on Earth had praised her speed and precision. Now she used every bit of that training. As the first guard reached for her, Kate stepped inside his reach. She struck his elbow joint with her palm, a spot where his armor had a gap. He grunted in pain, and his arm went weak. Before he could recover, Kate grabbed his arm and used his own weight against him. She twisted and pulled, throwing him off balance. He crashed into the second guard. The second guard tried to raise his shock weapon, but Kate was already moving. She swept his legs with a low kick. He fell hard, and Kate was on him instantly. She struck pressure points on his neck, places where even Zenthari armor couldn't protect. He went limp. The first guard was getting up. Kate grabbed the shock weapon from the unconscious guard. She tried to activate it, but nothing happened. The weapon had a genetic lock. Only Zenthari could use it. No problem. Kate swung the weapon like a club. The metal shaft caught the guard in the side of his head. His helmet protected him from serious injury, but the impact stunned him. Kate hit him again, and he went down. Dr. Krell stood frozen in the doorway, his eyes wide with shock. "Your research is over," she said. Dr. Krell turned and ran, screaming in Zenthari. Alarms began to wail throughout the facility. Kate moved quickly. She dragged the unconscious guards into the cell and took their armor pieces that she could use. The chest plates were too big, but the arm guards fit reasonably well. She also took their communication devices, even though she couldn't understand Zenthari. Maybe someone else could. She broke down the shock weapon, removing the power cell. It was still charged with energy. She might be able to use it for something later. The shaft of the weapon became a simple staff. Not as good as a rifle, but better than nothing. Kate stepped into the corridor. She needed to find her crew. She needed to find a way out. But most importantly, she needed to make the Zenthari understand that taking away her weapons hadn't made her helpless. It had made her dangerous. She moved down the corridor, staying close to the walls. Her feet were silent on the metal floor. Years of training had taught her how to move without sound. She reached a junction and paused, listening. Though the facility was larger than Kate had expected, she moved through corridors of gray metal, each one looking the same as the last. The key card she had taken from the guards opened most doors, which told her these were low-level security guards. Good. That meant the important areas would be elsewhere. She found a computer terminal in an empty room. The screen displayed Xanthari text, which she couldn't read. But there was a layout map showing the facility structure. Kate studied it carefully, memorizing the paths and exits. The detention cells were on this level. The hangar bay was 3 levels up. Between here and there were laboratories, storage areas, and guard barracks. Kate heard footsteps approaching. She ducked into a maintenance shaft just as 4 guards ran past, heading toward her cell. They were shouting in Xanthari, probably coordinating their search. Kate waited until they passed, then continued in the opposite direction. The detention block had 20 cells. Kate checked each one. Most were empty, which was somehow worse than finding them full. How many prisoners had been here before? What had happened to them? In the 8th cell, she found Dan Cooper. He was sitting against the wall, his face bruised but his eyes alert. When he saw Kate, his expression went from surprise to relief. "Kate, how did you—" He looked at her makeshift weapons and torn uniform. "Never mind. Can you get me out?" Kate swiped the keycard. The energy barrier dropped. Dan stepped out and stretched. "They took everything," he said. "Weapons, equipment, even my boots." "I know," Kate said. "We'll manage. Come on." Lisa and Jake should be close. They found Lisa Hayes in the next corridor. She was pacing in her cell, clearly planning something herself. When Kate freed her, Lisa immediately asked questions. "What's the plan? Are we taking the hangar? Do we have weapons?" "No weapons," Kate said. "And we're not leaving yet." Dan and Lisa both stared at her. "What do you mean we're not leaving?" Dan asked. Kate led them to an empty room and closed the door. She pulled out the datapad she had taken from Dr. Krell and showed them the Xanthari text. "I can't read this," she said. "But this facility is doing experiments on prisoners. Maybe humans, maybe other species. We need to know what's going on here before we leave." Lisa took the pad and studied it. She had worked with alien technology before and had a gift for understanding systems. After a few minutes, she nodded. "I can figure this out. Give me time." They found Jake Morrison in a cell at the end of the block. He was younger than the others, only 22, and he looked scared. But when he saw his crewmates, his fear turned to determination. "What do we do?" he asked. "We fight," Kate said simply. "But not the way they expect." She gathered her small team in a storage room. Using the facility map, she explained her plan. The Xanthari expected them to run for the hangar. Instead, they would move deeper into the facility, gathering information and causing chaos. "We're outnumbered and outgunned," Dan said. "How do we fight without weapons?" Kate picked up a metal pipe from the storage shelves. "Everything is a weapon if you use it right. This pipe, that cable, even the environment itself." She pointed to a power junction on the wall. "Lisa, can you overload that?" Lisa examined it and smiled. "Yes. It would shut down power to this entire section." "Good. We'll use their own facility against them." Over the next hours, Kate's team moved like ghosts through the facility. They avoided direct confrontation when possible, but when guards found them, they struck fast and hard. Kate taught them the basics. Use leverage. Target weak points. Never try to match strength against strength. They found a weapons locker, but every weapon inside had genetic locks. Only Xanthari could use them. Jake was frustrated, but Kate shook her head. "Weapons that can be taken away are liabilities. We rely on ourselves." They sabotaged power systems. They sealed doors and opened others, creating maze-like paths that confused the guards. They used the facility's communication system against itself, creating false reports that sent guards running in wrong directions. In a computer room, Lisa finally broke through the Xanthari encryption. What she found made them all go silent. "This isn't just one facility," Lisa said quietly. "There are dozens, maybe hundreds. They've been taking prisoners from all over the galaxy. Humans, definitely, but also Vaxil, Thren, and species I don't even recognize. What are they doing to them?" Jake asked. Lisa's face was pale. Experiments, testing weapons, studying biology, looking for weaknesses they can exploit. She looked at Kate. We're not the first humans here. There have been others. Lots of others. Kate felt cold anger settle in her chest. This wasn't just about her crew anymore. This was about justice. Download everything, she said. Every file, every record, every piece of evidence. Dom. 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 That'll take time, Lisa said. And it'll alert them to what we're doing. Do it anyway. The galaxy needs to know about this. While Lisa worked, Kate led Dan and Jake in creating more chaos. They found the facility's life support controls and began cycling air pressure in different sections. Not enough to hurt anyone, but enough to make the Zenthari uncomfortable and distracted. They discovered an armory, but again, all the weapons were locked. However, Kate found something useful. Explosive charges, meant for mining operations. She couldn't activate them with the Zenthari controls, but Lisa might be able to rewire them. Commander Vexthal's voice suddenly boomed through the facility speakers. He was speaking in English, clearly meant for Kate and her team. Humans, you cannot escape. This facility is surrounded by vacuum. There are no ships you can steal. Surrender now. And I promise you, quick deaths. Kate found an intercom panel and activated it. Commander Vexthal, this is Lieutenant Kate Morgan. You made a mistake when you took our weapons. You thought that would make us helpless. She paused. You were wrong. We don't need weapons. We are weapons. And we're going to tear your facility apart. She could hear Vexthal's angry breathing over the speakers. You are 4 unarmed humans in a facility with 50 armed guards. You cannot win. Watch us, Kate said and cut the connection. Dan looked worried. Kate, he's right. We can't hold out forever. Eventually, they'll corner us. We don't need forever, Kate said. We just need long enough for Lisa to finish downloading that data. Then we're sending it to every news organization, every government, every station in the galaxy. The Zenthari Empire will have to answer for their crimes. And how do we get away after that? Jake asked. Lisa worked on the computer terminal, while Kate, Dan, and Jake set up defensive positions around her. The room was small, but had 3 entrances, which made it hard to defend. Kate positioned herself near the main door, while the others watched the side passages. How much longer? Kate asked. 10 minutes for the download, Lisa said, her fingers flying across the alien interface. But I found something else. The facility has experimental weapons in storage. Really dangerous stuff. Plasma bombs, genetic toxins. Things designed to wipe out entire populations. Can we use them? Dan asked. Not the way they're intended, Lisa said. But I can overload them. They'd cause a chain reaction that would destroy the facility. Kate considered this. Destroying the facility would eliminate evidence, but they were copying everything. And leaving these weapons intact was too dangerous. Who knew what the Zenthari would do with them? Do it, Kate decided. Set them to overload after we leave. Give everyone time to evacuate. Even the Zenthari? Jake asked, surprised. We're not murderers, Kate said. We're soldiers. We give them a chance to leave. If they don't take it, that's their choice. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. Guards were approaching. Lots of them. Kate gripped her metal pipe and prepared herself. The first guard came through the door fast, his shock weapon raised. Kate was faster. She swept his legs and struck him in the neck as he fell. He dropped instantly. More guards poured through. Dan and Jake fought beside Kate, using the techniques she had taught them. They were learning quickly. A Zenthari might be stronger, but strength didn't matter if you couldn't land a hit. The humans were smaller and faster, darting in and out, striking and retreating, but there were too many. For every guard they dropped, 2 more appeared. Kate felt a shock weapon graze her shoulder. Pain shot through her arm, but she pushed through it. She couldn't stop. If she stopped, they were finished. Lisa! She shouted. Done. I have everything. Then we move. Now. The team fought their way out of the room. Kate led them through corridors she had memorized, taking paths the guards wouldn't expect. They climbed through ventilation shafts, crawled through maintenance tunnels, and squeezed through spaces too small for armored Zenthari. They reached the facility's main control center. It was a large room filled with computers and displays. Only 2 guards were present, and Kate's team overwhelmed them quickly. Lisa ran to the main console. I can access the communication array from here, she said, and I can set up the overload sequence. How long? Kate asked. 5 minutes to broadcast the data, then 30 minutes until the facility explodes. That's not much time, Dan said. It's enough. Kate replied. Lisa, start the broadcast. Send everything to every government, every news station, every public channel you can find. Lisa's fingers danced across the controls. Starting now. The doors burst open. Commander Vexthal entered with a dozen guards. He looked furious. His forearms were tense, and his dark eyes fixed on Kate. Enough of this, he growled. You are surrounded. You are outnumbered. Surrender, or die. Kate stood between Vexthal and her team. She had no weapons except the metal pipe in her hands. She was bruised and tired. Her shoulder still hurt from the shock weapon, but she stood straight and met his eyes. We're not surrendering, she said. And you can't stop what we've started. Vexthal noticed the computers. His eyes widened as he understood. What have you done? We're showing the galaxy who you really are, Lisa said from the console. Every crime, every experiment, every prisoner you've tortured, it's all being broadcast right now to thousands of locations. Stop it, Vexthal roared. He raised his weapon at Lisa. Kate moved. She threw her metal pipe with all her strength. It struck Vexthal's weapon, knocking it from his hand. Then she charged. She knew she couldn't beat him in a fair fight. He was too big, too strong. But Kate had never believed in fair fights. She believed in winning. She slid under his reaching arms and struck at his knee joint, a weak point in Zenthari anatomy. He grunted and stumbled. Kate rolled away as his guards opened fire. Shock bolts sizzled through the air where she had been. Dan and Jake attacked from the sides, using the chaos to their advantage. The control room became a battlefield. Computers sparked as stray shots hit them. Guards shouted in Zenthari. Kate's team fought with desperate energy. Broadcast complete, Lisa shouted. Data is spreading across the network. They can't stop it now. Then start the overload, Kate ordered. Lisa entered commands rapidly. Across the facility, experimental weapons began to destabilize. Warning lights flashed. Alarms wailed. Overload initiated, Lisa said. 30 minutes until detonation. Kate's voice cut through the chaos. She grabbed a fallen guard's communication device and activated it on all channels. Attention all personnel. This facility will explode in 30 minutes. All Zenthari personnel should evacuate immediately. This is not a threat. This is a fact. You have 30 minutes to reach your ships and leave. The guards hesitated, looking at Vexthal for orders. He was on one knee, his face twisted with rage and pain. She's bluffing, he shouted, as if to answer him. An explosion rocked the facility. It was small, just one of the experimental weapons beginning to fail. But it was real. Smoke began to fill the corridors. The guards broke. They ran for the exits, abandoning their posts. Even Vexthal's personal guards hesitated. Cowards! Vexthal screamed at them. She is one human, but his guards were already leaving. Survival instinct beat loyalty. They ran for the hangar bay. Feasty. Vexthal stood alone, facing Kate and her team. He was still dangerous, still strong, but he was also smart enough to know when he had lost. You have destroyed years of research, he said. Millions of credits of equipment. The Empire will hunt you for this. Let them try, Kate said. The whole galaxy knows now. Your black sites are exposed. Your crimes are public. The Empire will be too busy defending itself to worry about us. Another explosion shook the facility. Closer this time. You should leave, Kate said. 28 minutes now. Vexthel stared at her for a long moment. Then, without another word, he turned and left. His footsteps echoed down the corridor until he was gone. Kate's team stood in the ruined control center, breathing hard. They were exhausted, bruised, and battered, but they were alive. And they had won. Now what? Jake asked. Kate smiled. Now we steal a ship and go home. Lisa, which way to the hangar? Follow me, Lisa said. They ran through corridors filling with smoke. More explosions rocked the facility. Guards and scientists fled in panic, too concerned with their own survival to bother with prisoners. Kate's team reached the hangar bay to find dozens of ships preparing for emergency launch. That one. Kate pointed to a small transport shuttle. It's fast and has long-range capability. They boarded the shuttle just as another massive explosion tore through the facility. Kate took the pilot's seat and fired up the engines. The shuttle lifted off and shot out of the hangar into space. Behind them, the facility was tearing itself apart. Explosions bloomed like deadly flowers. The structure collapsed in sections, falling inward. Within minutes, nothing remained but debris, and expanding the stolen shuttle limped into neutral space 3 days later. Kate had pushed the engines as hard as she dared. But Zenthari technology was unfamiliar, and she didn't want to risk a breakdown in deep space. They had survived the facility, only to die alone in the dark between stars. They reached Station Meridian, a massive structure operated by the Galactic Coalition. It was neutral ground where all species could meet and trade. When Kate transmitted their identification codes and explained they were human refugees with critical information, the station granted them immediate docking clearance. Armed security met them at the airlock. Not hostile, just cautious. Kate and her team looked terrible. Their uniforms were torn and stained. They had bruises and cuts all over. They looked like what they were, survivors of something awful. I'm Lieutenant Kate Morgan, Human Defense Fleet, Kate said to the security chief. A tall alien with blue skin and 6 eyes. We need to contact human authorities immediately. We also have evidence of war crimes that need to be delivered to the Coalition Council. The security chief studied them carefully. The data you broadcast 3 days ago has already caused significant political disruption. The Zenthari Empire is denying everything. They claim the broadcasts were faked by human intelligence services. They're lying, Dan said angrily. We were there. We saw the facilities. We saw what they were doing. We have physical evidence too, Lisa added. She held up the data storage device. Everything is here. Prison records, experiment logs, financial records showing money trails. It's all real. The security chief nodded slowly. Come with me. The coalition is already in emergency session. Your testimony will be valuable. Over the next week, Kate and her team told their story again and again. First to human officials who arrived from Earth, then to coalition investigators, finally to the full council, broadcasted across the galaxy. Kate stood before representatives of 100 species and described everything. The ambush, the capture, the experiments, the escape. She didn't exaggerate or embellish. She just told the truth. Sometimes, the truth was enough. The evidence was overwhelming. The data Lisa had stolen contained files on thousands of prisoners. Humans, yes, but also dozens of other species. The Zenthari had been experimenting on anyone they could capture, looking for biological weaknesses they could exploit in future wars. The political fallout was immediate and severe. Species that had been afraid of the Zenthari Empire suddenly found their courage. Trade agreements were cancelled. Diplomatic relations were severed. The coalition passed emergency resolutions demanding the Empire close all black site facilities and allow inspections. The Zenthari government tried to resist, but the pressure was too great. Within a month, they had no choice but to comply. Inspection teams found 7 more facilities, like the one Kate had destroyed. Hundreds of prisoners were freed. The galaxy had irrefutable proof of what the Zenthari had been doing. But Kate didn't care about politics. She cared about the people who were still suffering. She testified at the trials of captured Zenthari officers. She helped identify victims and connect them with their families. She worked with other survivors, helping them process what had happened. Through it all, she refused to be called a hero. "I did what anyone would do," she said, in interview after interview. "I survived. That's all." But the galaxy disagreed. Kate Morgan became famous. News services called her the weaponless warrior. Military analysts studied her tactics. Her face was on screens across human space. 6 weeks after her return to Earth, Admiral Greg Lawson summoned her to fleet headquarters. He was an older man, with gray hair and sharp eyes, similar to Captain Price. He had been a soldier himself before becoming an administrator. "Lieutenant Morgan," he said, standing when she entered his office. "Please, sit." Kate sat, uncomfortable with the formality. She was used to working, not being praised. "I've reviewed your entire report," Lawson said. "What you accomplished was remarkable. 4 unarmed humans against a fortified facility. You shouldn't have survived, much less succeeded." "We got lucky," Kate said. "No," Lawson said firmly. "Luck doesn't explain what you did. You adapted. You improvised. You turned the enemy's assumptions against them. That's not luck. That's skill and intelligence." He leaned forward. "The Zenthari made a critical error. They assumed that without weapons, humans were helpless. You proved them wrong. But here's what concerns me. Much of our own military makes the same assumption. We train soldiers to use weapons. We teach them tactics and equipment. But what happens when they lose those weapons? What happens when they're captured or stranded?" Kate understood where he was going. "You want to change the training. I want you to change the training," Lawson said. "I'm offering you a position as an instructor. You would design and run a new program focused on survival, improvisation, and combat without equipment. We need soldiers who can think like you do. Soldiers who understand that the real weapon is up here." He tapped his head. Kate thought about it. She could return to regular duty, back to her weapons station on a ship, or she could teach others what she had learned. She could help create a military that didn't depend entirely on technology. "I'll do it," she said. "But on one condition." "Name it." "No politics. No propaganda. I teach real skills for real situations. And I get to be honest with the trainees. If something won't work in actual combat, I won't teach it just because it looks good in demonstrations." Lawson smiled. "Agreed. You have full authority to design the program however you see fit." Kate stood and shook his hand. "Then I'll start immediately." The Valor Initiative began 3 months later. Kate recruited instructors from special forces, survival experts, and martial artists. They created a training facility that looked nothing like traditional military schools. There were no shooting ranges or parade grounds. Instead, there were obstacle courses designed to look like enemy facilities, practice rooms filled with random objects that could be turned into tools or weapons, scenarios that forced trainees to think creatively under pressure. The training was brutal. Many candidates quit in the first week, but those who stayed learned skills that would save their lives. They learned how to fight without weapons, how to escape from cells and restraints, how to turn any environment into an advantage, how to survive when everything was taken away except their determination. The program's motto was painted above the entrance. "The weapon is not what you carry. The weapon is what you are." Word spread quickly through the military. The Valor Initiative became known as the hardest training in the human fleet, but also the most valuable. Graduates were sought after for special operations units and dangerous missions. They were soldiers who could adapt to anything. Kate threw herself into the work. She taught classes personally, demonstrating techniques and pushing trainees to their limits. She was demanding but fair. She never asked anyone to do something she wouldn't do herself. One day, 6 months into the program, Dan visited her at the training facility. He was back on active duty now, assigned to a patrol ship. He watched Kate run a training exercise where candidates had to escape 1 year after the Krios 7 incident. Kate received an invitation to a diplomatic reception on Earth. The Coalition was hosting a peace conference, and all major species were attending, including the Zenthari. Kate didn't want to go. She had work to do, trainees to teach. But Admiral Lawson insisted. The Zenthari specifically requested your presence, he said. They want to meet you formally. It's a political gesture, Kate. They're trying to show they've changed. Have they? Kate asked. Lawson shrugged. The inspections found no more black sites. They've released all known prisoners. They've signed new treaties with verification protocols. On paper, yes, they've changed. Whether that change is real or just political survival remains to be seen. So Kate went to the reception. She wore her dress uniform, which felt strange after months of training clothes. The event was held in a massive hall overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Representatives from across the galaxy mingled, making alliances and deals. Kate felt out of place among the diplomats and politicians. She was a soldier, more comfortable in a training room than a ballroom, but she had learned to endure discomfort. It was part of survival. A Zenthari delegation approached her. There were 5 of them, led by a young officer with elaborate markings on his face. He was smaller than Vexthal had been, but still imposing. His 4 arms were held in a gesture that Kate's cultural briefing had identified as respectful greeting. Lieutenant Morgan, he said in clear English. I am Sub-Commander Kelthas. I served at the Krios 7 facility. I was there when you escaped. Kate studied him carefully. Was this a threat? A challenge? But Kelthas seemed genuinely respectful, even nervous. I remember, Kate said cautiously. I wanted to meet you, Kelthas continued. To tell you something. We were taught that humans needed weapons to be dangerous. That your technology was your only advantage. That without it, you were weak prey species. He paused, choosing his words carefully. You taught us the truth. You showed us that we understood nothing about humans. You were more dangerous without weapons than with them. You turned our own facility against us. You defeated guards, sabotaged systems, rescued your crew, and destroyed years of our work, all without firing a single shot. Other Zenthari in the delegation nodded. One of them spoke. We have a saying now in our military academies. Never assume an unarmed human is helpless. The most dangerous human is one with nothing to lose. Kate wasn't sure how to respond. Part of her was still angry at what the Zenthari had done. The experiments, the prisoners, the cruelty. But she also saw something in these young officers' eyes. Genuine respect, maybe even fear. We learned from you, Kelthas said. Our entire military training has changed. We no longer focus only on weapons and technology. We study tactics, adaptation, survival skills. We study how you humans fight. Because you fight differently than anyone else. How so? Kate asked. Other species, including us, we fight with what we have. Humans fight with what they can find. You improvise. You adapt. You never give up. Even when logic says you should. That's not a technological advantage. That's a psychological one. And it's terrifying. Another Zenthari officer stepped forward. She was older, with scars marking her face. I was at one of the other facilities when the inspections came. We found journals from human prisoners. They wrote about resistance, about survival, about refusing to give up hope even in the darkest moments. One wrote, "They can take everything from me except my will to fight, and my will is the one weapon they can never remove." The officer's voice was quiet. That prisoner died before we could free them. But those words stayed with me. They haunt me, because I realized we never understood what we were fighting against. We thought humans were physically weak. We didn't understand that physical strength is only one kind of strength. Kate felt emotions rising that she had kept buried for months. Anger, grief, pride, sorrow. She took a breath to steady herself. The people who died in your facilities deserved better, she said. They deserved to live. No amount of changed policy brings them back. No. Kelthus agreed. It doesn't. And we must carry that guilt. But we can honor them by learning from their sacrifice. By making sure it never happens again. By teaching the next generation of Zenthari to respect other species, especially humans. He reached into his uniform and pulled out a small data chip. This contains everything I witnessed at Krios 7. Your tactics, your methods, how you survived and fought. I've written a full analysis. I wanted to ask your permission before I share it with our military academies. It would become required study for all Zenthari officers. Kate took the chip and looked at it. Her first instinct was to refuse. Why should she help the Zenthari military become better fighters? But then she thought about it differently. If Zenthari officers understood how humans fought, maybe they would think twice before starting another war. Fear could lead to respect. Respect could lead to lasting peace. Use it, she said. But add something for me. Include the names of every prisoner who died in your facilities. Every species, every person. Make your officers read those names. Make them understand that those were real people, with families and dreams, not test subjects. People, Kelthus nodded solemnly. It will be done, I promise you. The Zenthari delegation bowed and moved away. Kate stood alone for a moment, looking out at the ocean. A familiar voice spoke behind her. That was well handled. Admiral Lawson joined her at the window. They're genuinely afraid of you, you know. The Zenthari Military High Command has classified you as a maximum threat, higher than some of our capital ships. Kate smiled slightly. One person is more dangerous than a warship? One person who can turn anything into a weapon and refuses to give up? Yes, absolutely. Not just for humans, but for everyone. The galaxy sees humans differently now. They used to see us as young, naive, technologically behind. Now they see us as survivors, as fighters who get more dangerous, the more you take away from us. Is that a good thing? Kate asked. It's a real thing, and reality is better than illusion. The Zenthari learned that the hard way. Kate thought about her trainees back at the Valor Initiative. Hundreds of them now, learning the skills that had kept her alive. They would spread throughout the fleet, teaching others, creating a new culture in the human military. A culture that didn't depend entirely on technology. A culture that understood the real weapon was the person. What happens now? She asked Lawson. Now? You keep training soldiers. You keep building the Valor Initiative. And you keep reminding the galaxy that humans are not to be underestimated. He smiled. You've become a symbol, Kate. The weaponless warrior. The woman who proved that taking away our weapons doesn't disarm us. Kate looked at her reflection in the window. She saw herself in her formal uniform, decorated with medals she never wanted. But beneath the uniform, she was still the same person who had survived Krios 7. Still the fighter who refused to give up. Still the weapon that couldn't be taken away. They took my weapon, she said quietly. But they were looking at the wrong thing. They took my gun. But I was always the weapon. We all are. Every human. Every person who refuses to quit. That's what makes us dangerous. Not our technology. Not our weapons. Our refusal to accept defeat. Lawson nodded. That's the lesson of Krios 7. That's what the Valor Saga teaches. And it's a lesson that will echo through history. Years later, on the monument built where the Krios 7 facility once stood, they carved the words that had become famous across the galaxy. They took her weapon. She became the weapon. Below that, in smaller letters, were the names. Every prisoner who had died in the Zenthari facilities. Thousands of names from hundreds of species, a reminder of the cost of cruelty and the price of freedom. And at the bottom, a final inscription. The weapon is not what you carry. The weapon is what you are. Kate Morgan visited the monument only once. She stood before it, reading the names, remembering the people who hadn't survived to see justice. Then she returned to her work, training the next generation of soldiers who would carry forward the lessons she had learned in that terrible place. You could take away weapons. You could take away technology. You could take away every tool and advantage. But you could never take away the human spirit. The determination to survive. The refusal to give up. The will to fight back with whatever you had left. That was the real weapon. And it could never be removed, never be confiscated, never be destroyed. As long as humans refused to surrender, they would always be dangerous. They would always find a way to fight back. They would always turn the tables on those who underestimated them. The Zenthari had learned that lesson at great cost. And the galaxy would never forget it. The legend of Kate Morgan, the woman who became a weapon when her weapons were taken away, would be told for generations. A reminder that humanity's greatest strength was not in their tools, but in themselves. And that was a lesson worth teaching, worth remembering, worth living by. Because in the end, the weapon was never the gun. The weapon was always the person holding it. And when you understood that, you understood what made humans truly formidable. Not their technology, not their weapons, but their unbreakable will to survive and fight back, no matter what was taken from them. From a mock prison using only materials they could find in their cells. You've built something amazing here, he said. These soldiers are going to be incredible. Kate watched a trainee successfully pick a lock using a piece of wire pulled from his uniform. They're learning what we learned. That being disarmed doesn't mean being defeated. The Zenthari really did make a mistake, Dan said. Kate nodded. They thought taking our weapons would make us weak. Instead, it forced us to be strong in different ways. That's the lesson here. We're most dangerous when we have nothing left but ourselves. Because ourselves is enough. As clouds, Kate set course for neutral space, away from both human and Zenthari territory. They needed to reach a place where they could contact human authorities safely. We did it, Dan said quietly. We actually did it. Kate looked at her crew. They had survived against impossible odds. They had exposed terrible crimes. And they had done it all without weapons, using only their courage and intelligence. Yes, she said. And the Zenthari learned an important lesson today. You can take away a human's weapons. But that doesn't make us helpless. It just makes us creative. Kate smiled. It was not a nice smile. We make sure they're too busy to chase us. Lisa, how much explosive material did we find? Lisa checked her notes. Enough to take out half the facility. Then that's what we do. We destroy this place, and everyone learns what happened here. The Zenthari want to study human weaknesses? Kate's eyes were hard. Let's teach them about human strength instead. Let's show them what happens when you back a human into a corner and take away everything they have. You don't get a helpless victim. You get someone with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The team nodded. They were scared, but they were also angry. And anger was fuel. The Zenthari had taken their weapons. But they had left them with something more dangerous. Determination, intelligence, and the will to fight back with whatever they had. Ice is ahead. Guards responding to the alarm. Kate smiled. They were coming to her. Good. That would save time. She pressed herself against the wall and waited. The guards rushed around the corner, their weapons ready. But they were looking forward, expecting a threat ahead. They didn't see Kate until she was already moving. 3 seconds later, 2 more guards were unconscious on the floor. Kate took their key cards and kept moving. She was inside their facility now, moving through their corridors, and they had no idea how to stop her. Because they had made the fatal mistake of thinking humans needed weapons to be dangerous. They were about to learn the truth. Humans didn't need weapons. Humans were weapons. They just needed the will to fight and the intelligence to adapt. And Kate Morgan had both in abundance. They had made a mistake. A big mistake. They thought the weapon was the gun. They thought the weapon was the knife. They didn't understand. The weapon was never the tool. The weapon was her. Kate had been a hand-to-hand combat instructor before joining the fleet. She had trained in wilderness survival. She had spent 2 years with Earth's special forces, learning how to fight with nothing but her body and her mind. She had always known that weapons were just tools. The real weapon was the person. She looked around her cell. The Zenthari had taken her guns and her knives, but they had left her with something much more dangerous. They had left her with herself. Kate sat down and began to plan. The Zenthari thought they had won. They thought they were safe. They were about to learn the most important lesson humanity could teach them. You can take away a human's weapon, but that doesn't mean the human is unarmed.